I don't think the provinces haven't had a chance to catch up with mental health concerns and how do you put things in place to take care of these kids. And I would say, without sharing a specific example, we had some parents that show up at grad and they're just bawling because they said 2.5 years ago, my kid was in the basement and I couldn't get them even out of bed. And I don't know what it was, but somebody on your staff reached out and we moved them into online, and there was a connection somehow that was made where they became a little bit more interested. And then they became part of the Minecraft club or whatever that we had. And it was just a little glimmer of hope, just enough to get them through. And then somebody else on staff had a conversation with them about wanting to, where are you going to go to university, and look at what options you have. And then they made it to the grad list. And then to just from a attendance board hearing to a couple of years later to a student being able to graduate.
I remember in 2007, I taught my very first online course at the University of Regina. And at that time, there wasn't a great number of options and online learning was pretty text heavy and a slight transition from, I think, the previous iteration, correspondence courses as they were known back when. But I remember I had a student email me a few months before the course started and asked, can you tell me what the assignments are so I can finish them and hand them in as soon as the course opens? And I, being new to that, I thought that was an odd question. Then, of course, I realized that, it hadn't been that long. That was how online courses operated. There was no sense of community or whatever. And so I was sort of taken aback by that question and ultimately said, no, I don't think you can, because I wanted the course to still have the idea of a community that you learn with and from each other. And so that started my journey as an online instructor. And of course, continuing to do that to this day and seeing the evolution, not only of the tools and the affordances of online learning, but also just the way in which we've begun to understand it. Now, COVID certainly launched us into a new understanding of online learning that many people got exposed to. Some liked it, some didn't, all that. But it's continued to be a really important part of the education experience, not for all, but for many. And today's guests, Jennifer Bertsch and Robyn Perceval, have been doing this for a long time. So these are veterans of this craft, working in two different provinces under two slightly different frameworks. But I wanted to bring them together to kind of present to my audience an overview of online learning, virtual learning here in Canada, and why it still really matters. And you'll hear from them very passionate about the work they do and who have both worked very hard to make the experience as rich and as meaningful as possible so that this isn't a second choice. It's not leftovers in any way, but it is a legitimate educational experience. And I hope for those of you who are a little less familiar with the online learning environment that you'll listen to today's episode and maybe just come to a better understanding of why this is a very viable option. And I think will continue to be a viable option, if not for a segment of our population, but even in the hybrid model that Jennifer particularly is part of in Golden Hills School Division. Just great to have both these ladies on, share their stories, and give us a really great picture of the really great things that are happening in the world of online education in Canada. All right, ladies, good to have you in. I'm just going to start with Jennifer. Jennifer, do you want to just give a quick introduction of who you are, where you are, and your role in the distance learning conversation?
Sure. So I am Jennifer Bertsch. I'm the principal of the Golden Hills Learning Academy for Golden Hills School Division. So we are quite a large online school in Alberta. So we have students from in our district, and we have the majority of students that we're reaching across the province of Alberta.
Robyn?
Hi, thanks for having me. I am an online teacher with the Virtual Learning Center. I've been teaching since 2014, and my focus has been science. I'm senior science for the last few years, and we are a publicly funded institution out of the Ontario school system. And our school is unique in it has both an asynchronous and synchronous component to it. So our asynchronous is weekly modules for students using Canvas as our learning management system. And then we use Zoom for our synchronous component where students are timetabled. So we were using Zoom before COVID, before everyone started using it during COVID.
I know people that are watching are looking and saying, both you ladies couldn't have been in education that long, as young as you both look. But I was privy to the conversation we had prior to me pressing record that suggested this is not like a new thing for you. So I'm wondering, Robyn, I'll start with you. Maybe this can be personal, but I want this to maybe be more about your experience in distance learning. In the last 10 years, for example, you talked about using Zoom before Zoom. Everybody uses Zoom. But even in the last, and again, if we went back further, we could talk about correspondence course, and Jennifer talked about driving physically to different places. That was part of the distance learning experience. But even from in the last 10 years, for example, what do you think has changed the most in your experience and just what you're seeing in distance learning overall? Robyn, start with you.
Yes, and I think, again, it came from COVID. There's a pre and post COVID.
Yeah.
But since I started, we were using Adobe Connect. It had some features, and I actually can't remember our learning management system. But then when we changed to Zoom and Canvas, that now integrations directly into Canvas really do offer opportunity for students that actually can't attend our live lessons to still participate in a formative capacity, and then for assessments so that they do have to hand in. And especially Zoom has just really changed to encourage students to build community and participate and have discussion and go on microphone. They can run the class, but especially with the AI assist, I use that when I have one-on-one conferencing with students. It can take the transcript and ensure that I'm meeting or they're meeting the rubric expectations. Now, of course, I don't use AI for feedback, but it's just an assist for me to make sure that I've checked all the boxes. So Zoom has I've noticed a huge improvement in terms of building community, especially in our population.
Jen.
Yeah, so I've been at it a while. This is my 30th year in education, and I have to say that not all of it in distance ed, but I've been in distance ed for about 15 years. And I agree with Robyn. There was definitely a COVID shift for sure. We've used Moodle for most of those 15 years. We used to use D2L, but we switched to Moodle, and it's Moodle. We've grown with Moodle, or they've grown with us. I'm not quite sure which came first, but we are asynchronous. Pre-COVID, I would say a lot of our students who came to us needed to come to us because they had some sort of need for flexibility. So they were students that it just wasn't working in a regular bricks and mortar. And whether it was some anxieties and they just couldn't be in the school anymore, or whether they were a hockey player or a sports person and the timetabling was hard, that was our clientele. And I think we started with 150 kids. I mean, 5 teachers. We could all fit around the boardroom table, and we're at 50 teachers and 15. We're just huge right now. And I would just say that one of the biggest shifts with COVID was these students that didn't have the opportunity. Everybody had to do it online for a while. And I think there were some surprises. I think some kids went, yeah, I'm never doing that again, because that was terrible. But I think there was a lot of students, especially in high school, that went, you know what? I liked that. I actually did better, or that actually was, hey, I can do this. And it opened up a door that I don't think any of us saw coming. And realistically, I could say that a good portion of those kids would be successful anywhere they took courses because motivated. But I would just say it opened up a doorway into what's possible here for how you are.
So let me ask you, Jennifer, though. So now, what is the process by which a kid enters in that? So I'm thinking of 2 scenarios. Either the student, the family themselves realize that we actually want our kid to be involved in this, or a teacher says, what we're doing in here is not working, and maybe online learning might be for them. So what's the process that happens to get a student enrolled?
Yeah. So basically, we get calls that come to the main line, and they're like, we find out whether they're staying enrolled in their school and they're just looking for a couple options, or they're willing to go full, or they might be trying a hybrid. A lot of our in-division students that are struggling a little bit and their program choice, they dabble in it a little bit, and we do a hybrid with the school where we sort of meet them where they're at. Yeah, we have conversations with them and help guide them and just basically give them the opportunity to really choose where they're going to start, how long this is going to take, program planning. Sometimes what happens is after a little bit, it might not be ideal or it might take them longer, but they start on a journey where we have conversations with them. Part of why it's hard to grow so big as we've grown so big in such a short period of time is that we've had that little touch or individualized program touch. And that's been hard to maintain because that's what makes us a good experience for kids. But yeah, we have those conversations with students and we strive to meet them where they're at. And then we work through. But I also believe that's why we're growing. So the growth has come in that so-and-so's heard that this was a good program. So-and-so heard that it was the more huger program. This is how you've helped them. And that's how it's growing.
Okay, I want to come back to what you said about the individualized part, how you do that. But Robyn, just next to you, and I wonder, same kind of question, like how that happens, but also in your context, because you do have a synchronous component to yours, how does that sort of make it more challenging perhaps, or maybe easier? I don't know.
I think it would be more challenging without the synchronous component. Just in terms of getting to know your students, I mentioned just building community and offering the academic integrity around it so that I can see in real time that learning is taking place. I may have mentioned we're a little different, that we are just a completely online school. Now, I know in Ontario after COVID, they implemented the 2-credit rule where everybody that was graduating in Ontario had to take 2 e-learning. That is actually separate from us. So they would get that from a different source, whether it was their school or we have another kind of e-learning model even within our board. So again, ours is just a smaller population where we have these students from grade 9 until they graduate. And I do get a small percentage of rural students that maybe couldn't get biology for 1 semester and they're in a physical school. Our lessons are recorded so that they can attend their physical school and then still participate asynchronously and then watch the recording. I can see if they've watched the recording.
Right. But you're not a hybrid school though. Like you're not
No,
hybrid.
Completely online. And in fact, we have the full complement of offerings. So one of my colleagues teaches music and has guitar classes and vocals and keyboarding and brass wind. And then we have all the core courses. As I said, right now I have grade 11 biology, 2 different sections, and then grade 12 biology. And then my colleague just wrote a course for kinesiology and the health tech. Oh, and then one of my favorite courses is the peer tutor program, which I'm sure you have encountered in a physical school where a student has taken the course and then is physically present in the class. They're present in my Zoom meeting and they might run activities, take attendance, do everything a peer tutor would do. As well, they have their own office hours. So students can go in and get tutoring from a peer where sometimes it's blue kits or cahoots or just asking questions, but it is super important where these students end up having friends that maybe they've never met for 4 years that they've been physically at the school. So it's interesting in that it is different, but as I said, I couldn't see myself now teaching online without the synchronous component, just because you really do get to know the students.
And having taught post-secondary virtual courses, I always have, not that I have to, but I always include a virtual or a synchronous component because I feel that's my best way of trying to create community. But Jennifer, I think you're talking about some other ways and in which you have in your entire system have worked towards making that kind of community feel experience. And so this isn't an isolated thing, even though you might take your course asynchronously. So talk a little bit about that extra effort that you're putting in to ensure that kids feel welcome, they feel part of it, and there is a sense of belonging in that.
Yeah, Robin's right. It is harder. It's harder unless you include some key kind of elements as part of your best practices as a teacher. So we spend a lot of time with our teacher about how are you building relationship with your students. We have that conversation all the time. As a matter of fact, it's one of our questions when we're interviewing teachers, like, how would you engage students when you're in an asynchronous environment? How would you go about that? How would you get them excited when they're just opening? That's a lot of expectation of what your course looks like, unless you have this relationship that's built in. We have a lot of conversations about contacting students early and often, and then in the early and often, how are you reaching out? We have welcome emails, and we have Google Meets, we have Zoom meetings. We do have some live lessons that occur. So we have to spend a lot of time working with our teacher. How engaging is the course? What does that first interactive and teacher page look like to catch the kids and bring them in? Those pieces are part of it. The other thing that happens, and Dean, this won't be a surprise because I know you work with our districts. This is very much comes from our powerful learning work in our division. We collaborate as teachers. So unlike a lot of online schools, our teachers work in our office, elbow to elbow with other teachers and with our staff. And so we've created this environment of teachers feeding off of each other in really positive ways about them getting excited about, oh, look what they're doing with their course and show me how to do this. And they spend a lot of time together, and they spend a lot of time together talking about particular students that may be a little bit more in need of some extra attention from our staff. So there's constant behind the scenes happening, collaborating as staff, and how are we going to do this and how are we going to meet their needs, as well as inviting students in different ways. And that's happening all the time, because without the synchronous model, you just can't do it any other way.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Robyn?
From an asynchronous perspective, our school, if we're speaking about community, we actually do have a student council, a yearbook. We have a newspaper. There are clubs. I just received an email about the March Break Book Marathon Award that went out to students. So students do have their own kind of asynchronous course as well, called the directory, where that it is teacher moderated, and then things like this can occur so that they can participate if they are also not, as you said, able to participate synchronously in Zoom. Because again, we do have some athletes and some people in physical schools that can't attend.
It just struck me when you both shared these things. I'm thinking back to those early days of online, not even on whatever distance learning, because it wasn't online in the early days, and just how the whole concept of belonging and a relationship was not at all a part of that. It was so transactional, right? Here's your work, you hand it in, I'll mark it, and that's how it's going to go. Not interested in how you're doing as a human being or whether life is good for you or not. That's not what this is about. And I think there's many that would argue, gee whiz, I'd love to go back to those days because of the simplicity of it, right? Like you just were unengaged as a teacher, but so different now that obviously mirrors what's happening in our classrooms, with the fact that you both are working so hard to ensure that is not a void in an online experience for whatever the reason is that a child has to or chooses to work online. But I as much as you can share any kind of data you want, which is fine, like I always like a good story. And I know, again, both of you would have stories about those successes, about like for whatever that kid is, whether it was just something, I don't want to say tragic, but just something that made them unable to function or be successful in an in-person classroom. They decided to go online and it led to whatever. So I wonder if you could both pull out from your archives of great stories, just one story. And it could be somebody who's maybe gone on as well graduated, or it could be somebody that's currently in one of your schools. I don't know who wants to start, has a story they want to share.
I'll jump in. So I think we've had a lot of situations where students have come our way because it just wasn't working anywhere else. And I think part of why online education now is a good option is not just because of COVID, but because sometimes it might be the only other option to a bricks and mortar. School divisions, I don't think the provinces haven't had a chance to catch up with mental health concerns and how do you put things in place to take care of these kids. And I would say, without sharing a specific example, we had some parents that show up at grad and they're just bawling because they said 2.5 years ago, my kid was in the basement and I couldn't get them even out of bed. And I don't know what it was, but somebody on your staff reached out and we moved them into online, and there was a connection somehow that was made where I became a little bit more interested. And then they became part of the Minecraft club or whatever that we had. And it was just a little glimmer of hope, just enough to get them through. And then somebody else on staff had a conversation with them about wanting to, where are you going to go to university, and look at what options you have. And then they made it to the grad list. And then to just from a attendance board hearing to a couple of years later to a student being able to graduate, I would say that's our biggest success stories. But I can also think of like little baby steps along the way, even where teachers, I have this sort of really clear memory in my mind where it was this time of the year where I was feeling a little overwhelmed from an administrative perspective. And we had a fairly new teacher. And we had this conversation over and over again about the student they were plagiarizing, and multiple conversations with them. They continued to still use some sort of different AI, and he was like, I want to have a conversation with this kid. Like, we're having mom and dad in, we're having a conversation. And I thought my years of jadedness came in and I was like, okay, we can try. And then coming out of that meeting and realizing that it wasn't anything to do with this teacher wanting to prove a point but it was about, he wanted the student to learn that when you get into university, this isn't going to help you. It's not about me anymore. It's not about what I can do for you. It's about what you're going to be able to do for yourself. And this is the kind of impact it's going to have on you. And I remember going out thinking, wow, like I learned from my teacher that day that he was right. Sometimes sometimes those are your success stories, because you just watch your teachers. They know what's good for kids before kids know what's good for them. And that itself is a success story.
Well, and you're not going to be able to have that conversation with a kid unless you've earned their respect in some way, right? That they would actually listen to you, which again, that doesn't happen unless you invest in them. Kudos to your teachers and your team. Robyn, what's your story?
I have a couple, so I'll try and be concise, but just to echo you with the AI component. So unfortunately, some of the students may have me as a teacher 3 times. So because if they take grade 11 chemistry and biology and then grade 12 biology, then they're stuck with me. So seeing that, just as the example you gave, Jennifer, I just thought of this where I have had students maybe not be as above board when they're submitting assignments. And then now that we're into this AI pilot project, I see the same students that are now just flourishing because it's complete transparency of, we're using AI. This is how we're using it. This is how we're going to say that we're using it. And I'm seeing them flourish right now. So I'm super excited. And I love that light bulb moment in the synchronous component where you can see that they get it. But the students with IEP, that could be a range of, they have autism, or maybe they have kind of vision issues or something we can differentiate. I had a student who was just brilliant in science and was autistic, and the students would never have known. He didn't go on microphone or go on screen, but he was participating in the chat, and the students would just continually say, you are so brilliant, and let's ask so-and-so what the answer is, or whatever so-and-so said. And now if that student was in a physical school, it probably wouldn't be the same in terms of equity and inclusion. So that, again, without giving too many details, those are my favorites when I do know what the students are bringing in with their IEP, but nobody else knows. And they're absolutely participating and being successful.
That's awesome. This one's real quick. And again, I think, from some of the things, Jennifer, you shared, I think I know the answer, but I'll ask you. So distance learning in your world, is it growing, shrinking, or just leveling? What's happening right now?
Oh my goodness, it's growing. So I pulled our numbers in the last 10 years. Like we started out at like 100, 200, 300, 400. And then COVID hit and we like doubled. We've doubled every year. I think this past year we had 8,000 students, not full time, but full time equivalency. I would say we're at about 250 or 2,500 easily. But it's what happened. I'll give you an example. We opened our summer school registration. We do term 4 summer school registration for our division. It opens April 15th. And within the first hour, we hit 300 applicants. I was like, what is going on? And true, we had a strike. We had a strike in October, which meant an exemption in our provincial writing in January. So this is an odd year, but this is a pattern. So every year that we open summer school registration and then we open the registration for fall, we have more numbers than we've ever had before. And true, we've got a population that I think there's some things happening in our province where they don't have like schools to go to, where we don't quite have the number of seats for sure. But it's just unbelievable. Like there's I can't believe
Well,
in years.
and I'm guessing, you correct me if I'm wrong, but the majority of those students are hybrid students, correct?
Yeah. So we call
Yeah.
it on primary, but that's exactly what they are. I would say 6,000 to 7,000 of them are students that are enrolled somewhere else in Alberta.
Sure.
And they're taking, and the interesting thing is that they're not just taking, 10 credits with us. They're taking 10 credits with us and another board. They're like like Robyn described, they're in another school somewhere taking kind of live classes. That's our majority. So
Yeah.
that's what kids are doing now. I suppose.
Well, and kudos to Alberta for allowing kids that kind of flexibility and choice. Because and again, I don't want to speak too much just because I don't know exactly, but I know because I had colleagues who ran the Manitoba remote. It's called Manitoba Remote School, which again, post-COVID had a climb, but they've since abandoned that. And I know there's still distance learning offered, but it felt a little bit like, because I know the lead principal there, and he was a little concerned about the fact that you may be taking away options for kids who were finding value in it, not just because of COVID, but we're realizing, as you pointed out, that, this type of learning works for me in a way that an in-person class doesn't. And again, nothing should be for everybody. That's obviously not a knock against brick and mortar. We all believe in value. That's amazing. You can get to go to a classroom with other kids. It's awesome, but it isn't for everybody. Robyn, what about your context? Growing, staying the same, or decreasing?
Yes, I can really only speak to Virtual Learning Center. We do in Ontario have this 2-credit rule where students can take or are encouraged to take 2 e-learning credits. Now they can opt out, no questions asked, and that is separate from our school. But just a little bit of a history, this school started as a hybrid where you had a teacher in a physical classroom and then students would log in remotely and watch the teacher teach. And then it evolved into early 2000. There were 3 teachers. I think I want to guess maybe 150 full-time students, maybe not even that much. And that would have been early 2000. And then we are up to 28 teachers, I think, maybe half our full-time equivalent. And we have close to 700 students. So it has, over the years, just continually added, and it mostly from word of mouth. Because again, we're not poaching students from physical schools unless they need an additional credit. These students choose to come in grade 9 and choose to just have a completely online high school experience. But I will say the majority of my students have a very diverse extracurricular background, whether they are participating in sports or music or plays. I'm incredibly lucky in the students that I teach, or maybe a high religious component. So it is a very diverse population.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the school. We talked about students. I'm wondering about the question about the teachers, right? And again, I know I don't remember if this is pre-recording or once we record, but I know both of you talked about how proud you are of your staff and the people that work for you. I think for people that don't teach online, they might think, oh, online teaching, it's so awesome because of, I know, Robyn, you're actually being able to be at home and there's all these, I'm sure there's benefits to it too. Yeah, why wouldn't there be? But to me, it always reminds me a little of people who complain about how awesome it is to it'd be great to be a farmer and have all sides do it. Like, go ahead and do it. So just talk a little bit about the people that you work with and why because I know that they're enjoying what they're doing. Like, they are happy in this role. Why are they so happy in this role?
I think that what we have found is that our teachers, we've worked really hard over the years too. I have to say this. We've worked really hard, not just in our division, especially in our division, but not just in our division, to change the face of, we're not at home in our pajamas. That's not how this is that's not how this is working. We've spent a lot of time to create this environment in our building where our teachers are really working together and they're creating their own staff-based community. But there's expectations on that. I say to them all the time, yeah, it was a snow day. The high school down the road, people were getting there because the buses showed up. You should be too. And so we've really embedded those same expectations on our staff, just as a professional courtesy to each other. They're all part of the same local community where they don't want to be seen as, oh, I've got it easy. But we definitely spend a lot of time working as a staff together to get really excited about what they're doing. They really do enjoy it. I would say overall, our teachers feel like, and it's not just our teachers, it's our front office staff. They're very student-centered, and they spend a lot of time individualizing things for students so they can be successful. And I think what comes with that is this collaboration feast. They have to collaborate with each other, have to come up with new ways of engaging. And one of our main goals is engaging the unengaged, and these conversations are happening all the time. How do you keep original thought in action? How are you getting them to produce their own work and not just do AI? And we've had lots of conversations with Katie White and creating what kind of process folios do we have? What are we recreating what are you asking students to produce? What's their evidence of learning? And I think when you engage teachers in that environment together and they get to collaborate, that's where the excitement gets. That's where that comes forward. And then they just want to do more and they want to create more. And they usually come to us and say, they come to the admin team and say, hey, you know what I'm thinking of creating? We have an English teacher that created an AI introduction to AI. She's going to change, but I think we have to have this. We have to have this for kids. They can start dabbling in this. So that probably didn't answer your question at all, Dee.
No, but I think what I'm gleaning from what you're saying is that literally the biggest appeal is the sense of collaboration, that we're doing this together. And I think the idea that probably unlike a brick and mortar school where a kindergarten teacher and a grade 8 teacher might not have a ton in common, here you are dealing with a lot of the same issues because of the structure. So when someone discovers an engagement activity or something that worked really well with them, they're going to share that with, doesn't matter what they teach, right? Because they're doing it online. And so how can I create these things? So I get that. And again, having worked in your division, that's not an ethos of just the online community. That's your entire division, which I think is great. But yeah, I think, again, you picked up on that idea that because we are teaching in this very specific mode, we relate more to each other across grade and curriculum. Robyn, what about you? What do your teachers say about why they enjoy teaching in the virtual school?
I always tell people that this is a job and a hobby. Hopefully my union is not listening to that comment, but I've had incredibly supportive administrators, so principals over the years. So I think we have had now, this is a fourth one since not because they don't like their job, just because they get shuffled around I'm sure, but they've been so supportive in giving us autonomy. And just if I have ideas, if I need software, especially for science, then they'll be super supportive and I get to go and learn it and research it and get a yes or a no. And that is the same kind of mindset for, I would say, most of our teachers. They just really enjoy their job. And a lot of the courses that aren't core courses that have been written have come from teachers just saying, we need this course. We need the peer tutor program. We need this health tech course. And then they write the course. So I write my own kind of Canvas modules and then create my own activities for my Synchronous component. And yes, we do have an incredibly collaborative staff where every time we get together or just through email, whatever they're doing in their courses, they will share with each other so that I get ideas on how to improve my course. So I am super excited about the prospect of learning things and again, making it as much like a physical school as it can possibly be. And particularly this semester, I think I mentioned now this AI pilot project, I begged for this and I'm super excited now because I think if we treat this as how can this kind of augment learning and instead of let's just get rid of AI because it's not going away. I remember where I was when somebody said, just Google it. And then I used to Google my own assessments. Now I do really feel like it's up to me to make my assessment so that students can use AI and also learn at the same time. They are critical consumers of information rather than passive. I'm going to believe everything AI says, but I'm super excited at this prospect of trying to learn how that is going to happen. I don't know if anyone has
Let me
answer.
dive into that. Let me dive into that question a little bit more specifically, because I remember having started doing this work around AI and working at very senior levels and trying to create some sort of a structure to approach it. I remember it was probably in BC. I was working with a small district, and there was their online teacher, and just explaining to me why AI has a bit of a different twist when it comes to the online component, especially in terms of, I guess, the assessment kind of piece is like why it's a slightly trickier, more, I don't know if more nuanced is the right word, but there are certain things that you have to be much more attentive to and address sooner or in more detail than perhaps somebody who teaches in a physical classroom. So maybe just talk a little bit about what sort of the online and AI piece has been, because Robyn, I'll get you to go first because you just pick up on what you start talking about it because you recognize this as, hey, we got to get on this.
Yes, absolutely. Last semester, and again, I take great care to change my assessments each semester because often we'll teach kind of siblings or there can be people in one physical school that are all taking our online together. So that's a whole different conversation. But just in the last year, I've spent daily trying to not make my assessments now AI proof because I don't actually think that exists anymore. When I first started this, the research was in higher education, let's really focus on process over product and have them have their iterations of writing and what were they prompting, etc. I've put that assignment now through ChatGPT. We are a Google school board, so I'll make my assessment in Google with the help of AI, trying to make it AI kind of proof. I think I need to change that term. And if you put it through ChatGPT, it will say, oh, do you want this as a grade 11 student with your kind of iterations and your process and your prompting? So again, that is up to me to change my assessment. So the current answer right now is it's a 50-50 for me, where if the assignment, let's just arbitrarily say, is worth 60 marks or something, half of that will be the process product. So whether or not they're making a Wii video or operating in Canva with a mind map and using AI as an assist to get the information. Now I'm currently having them research even the source, who wrote the article, peer review, plus the funding associated with it. So to give a direct example, students are now looking at AI and the environmental impact. So if they are sourcing a study, they then also have to find out where the funding is coming from and what is a potential way to mitigate it, the environmental impact, plus a career opportunity. Because that's a real fear for students. What do jobs look like? And I'm not sure anyone knows that at this point. So once they've submitted that to part of the assessment, the second half of it by the next week will be a follow-up oral conversation or interview. And again, it's not punitive. It's just to ensure that they actually can explain what they've written in the assignment. And full transparency, I tell the students, I'm using AI to help me craft these questions, to go through your mind maps and without personal information And I say, the questions will be about your assessment. And when we started this process, it maybe wasn't as easy for them to recognize the importance of that. But as we're continuing on, I think it's getting better, where they can now tell that they've learned the information, they can explain it, and not just passively taking it from like a Gemini and dumping it in. So that is my goal. And I've scaffolded it in terms of the mark and the allocation, where it was lower level, like maybe 10 marks at the beginning, and then it's going to increase to their culminating, where for one of my classes, it will be a wee video. And I've had AI kind of generate prompts based on their interest. So I'm super excited. But then the final piece or half of it will be that final conversation, because then I know they've done the information, they understand.
What's your thinking on that, Jen?
Yeah, when you've been online for a while, we were always aware of the policing part of the plagiarism because kids weren't in front of us. So I think we went into this sort of new AI world where we're like, okay, now it's just easier for them to have access to face. And you know what? They're sounding better than they used to, because the old way of plagiarizing was one thing. We have done quite a lot of professional development because we had a lot of admin staff conversations, plus we've done a lot of PD. And in those admin staff conversations, we spend some time with staff about, let's move away from policing. That's not going to help anybody. And let's move to, what do our courses look like? What are we asking kids to do? What does your assessment look like? How clear are we around our assessments and what we're expecting? Katie White always says, clear is kind. And we've built that into sort of our conversations around AI as well, because here's the reality. This is what we are expecting very clearly and very transparent in a rubric format, how much we want you to use AI in certain assignments. And here's our guide. This is what it is. We're going to hand it to you, and we're going to tell you with each assignment, how much you're able to use that. And then in addition to that, when we're afraid that students are using too much AI, or they've used or we can see it, we can identify it. It's the same conversation that Robyn talked about. That's not a punitive conversation. Let's have a conversation. This is why the relationships are so important. Because when you have relationships with students, you have the relationship to say, okay, I asked you about this. Just tell me what you learned. Tell me what this concept was all about. And when they can tell the teacher that, we're like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much AI used. If they used it and it taught them that, then great. Then we know that we can move forward. But if they can't talk about it in that conversation, then the conversation is a different conversation. And try at all costs to avoid when AI or plagiarism policy and call it academic integrity, because what we're trying to do is create integrity in students, because what we want is for them to leave grade 12 and go on to post-secondary and actually use those same lessons that they've learned from us, that this isn't going to get you anywhere. What's going to get you there is, where's the deep thinking, where's the deep learning, where's the critical thinking skills that you had to put into like an example, we use process folios for our grade 12 writing prompts and processes. It's very hard to AI that, because it's a whole process to get to the end result of our writing. We know when they've used, it's obvious. About if we want students to take ownership into their own memory, it's hard. When they're not in front of you, it's hard. And you do want to go to what? You're going to spend just as much time teaching them the integrity piece moving forward. And then there's the time too where teachers just need to, that particular kid is not learning the lesson. And you know what? It's going to catch up with them. It'll catch up. It'll catch them at some point.
I think there's a couple things that come out to me. One, and I think we talked about this, Robyn, in Belleville when we were there last week, is that teachers who are good with assessment, who triangulate, who have all these things, they're not threatened by AI. AI is, it's fine. We'll figure it out. I think the other thing that I think about is, this is where I feel so sorry for post-secondary, because relationships aren't really a part of that experience, right? If you're taking a first-year university class and there's 100 and some kids in your class, good luck. Like, you just have to give up at that point. And this is where, again, both of you talked about the investment that your teachers are making into the lives of these kids. That puts you at such an advantage in terms of actually understanding, does this kid actually know the thing that I need them to know? If you don't have that, then you're relying on just the evidence of their learning and now I have to play all kinds of other tricks. So I think, yeah, just appreciate the fact that people are acknowledging. That's why we've been talking about relationships for so long, not just because it's a touchy-feely thing for some people. That's not why. It's so that I actually know whether or not the student in front of me is learning the thing I need him to learn. So anyway, last question to get you out of here. I appreciate both of you is, if you were both queen for the day and you could just like either structurally, and you can answer this question from a couple perspectives. Maybe this is just organizationally and systemically, I think distance learning would be best if we did it this way. So those are maybe things that are currently beyond your scope of control. Or just in terms of what I want for when I think about from the perspective of children, like this is what children need in terms of here's how I would structure. And again, I think both of you have some advantages in your slightly different approaches, but most of those things are probably not things that you've completely or had much of a say in. These are just the systems under which you work and you're doing the best you can. So queen for a day, one thing you would just maybe change or adapt from the current iterations of distance learning in your worlds. Whoever wants to go first.
I'll go first. Equitable. I'd make things not equal, but equitable for kids. I think we have a big province with a lot of needs out there, and we have students who just, and it's hard when our summer school is filling up so fast, and I wish we could offer more courses in more areas, but there's some areas of our province where there's not enough seats in a high school. Or you're in a rural area and you can only take Bio 30 once in the school year. And there's that piece of equity that I would, just to make it just an even playing field for kids, because I think sometimes kids feel this disadvantage. I also think that it's definitely not an equitable opportunity to access other resources they need to come along with them. We try very hard to wrap our supports around kids so they can be successful in school. And there's a lot of kids in this province that just don't have access to those pieces. And wouldn't it be great if they all had their sort of dual screens and a nice working computer and read to write and all the wonderful tools that would just the autistic student who could just do the text speech or whatever. I just think that kids with those things at their fingertips, what they're capable of doing, and it's just really hard because kids have the same access. They just don't. That's not too much to ask, Kate. Let's
queen for a day, get a lot done in a day. You'd have to work hard, but I think you could do it. Robyn, what would you do in Ontario?
Can you hear me? Just my AirPod shut down. They ran out of battery. That's the online world. So I'm hoping you can hear me. So I agree with Jennifer in terms of the equity piece. We do have rural students. That would be great, just high-speed internet and tech for everyone. But I'm just going to go in a slight different direction because I am from a phys ed perspective. And I wish they would mandate an unplugged block for students that are completely online where it's like a recess. And I don't know why they don't have recess anymore in maybe high school where kids or students are just having to participate in some type of physical activity and demonstrate that they're doing that. It could even be meditative or yoga or just get off your screens and you have to demonstrate that you've done it, because now we're seeing mental health. Now we do have a program even just within our school that is starting to delve into that. And I think it is mostly student-led, teacher-moderated, which is interesting that they are now really focusing on that. But it would be great to really consider what is the health impact of these students being online. Now, they do choose it in our school, but every day, just like it's job and exposed to the blue light and the sedentary lifestyle. So if that could be mandated, that would probably be my focus. And then that is also going to enhance learning as a result.
I love it.
I do want to just mention one thing about the AI. I had a student say to me, I wish AI would go away because I don't want to have to think anymore. I'm done with thinking. And I was like, okay, that's my win.
So I'll leave you with that.
Oh, I appreciate it. I love the emphasis on the physical side of it. And again, I've been grateful to work with a number of boards who have called that out as being like, we actually see potentially AI is hopefully reducing screen time. Maybe if we get it right. But I also love what you just said about AI making me think. That's what we're supposed to do. Good. That if it's making you think, and I love that. That's why I always point out, I love it when AI fails us, because then it just makes us go, oh, we can't trust this thing. It's not always doing the thing. So now I have to really be thoughtful in its production. So anyway, listen, I just want to thank you both for taking the time to share what's happening. Again, I think you're an I don't know if it's underserved, but certainly underappreciated, aspect of our education system that is doing a fantastic job of addressing the needs of a community of kids who have, for whatever reason, again, I know the variety is probably greater than most people think. Some people have a vision of maybe it's a physically disabled kid or some kid with mental challenges, which I'm sure there are those. But then there's others who are just choosing this because this is better for them. So the diversity within your communities is great, but they all have a reason. So I thank you that you've been a part of that. And I just hope that as people are watching this, who are either entering this phase or thinking about what this could look like in their school division, that they could reach out to you and pick your brains as they need to. So thank you both for your time today.